brave people who gave everything to turn the world as it is into the world as it should be. Got it now? Let's hear it for them.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. It's the third and final day of panel presentation. It's been an exciting 2 days. So thanks for being here. I know it's really early. And also, welcome to our panel. I'm Star Woods. I'm joined by my panel mates, Brittany Massey, and also Isabel Kintish, who's here via Zoom link from Paraguay. So our panel is connecting communities to public lands through volunteerism and management. So although our projects span from the American Southwest all the way to South America, we're each driving communities to have a deeper connection to public lands, whether that's through a management plan, community engagement surrounding recreational access, volunteerism, or a combination of these elements. So our projects sought to address the need, now more than ever, to protect public lands through community engagement surrounding those local communities, those local public lands. This can actually, as we've seen in recent years, through Bears Ears National Monument and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in Utah, our public lands have been reduced, and they can be left unprotected from other interests such as oil and gas. Connecting these communities can inspire them to have stewardship of these lands and potentially alter future outcomes. Management plans, public engagement and collaboration, volunteerism, and stewardship. So what do these 4 elements have to do with our projects? So starting with Allie, she wrote a management plan incorporating community engagement to leverage volunteerism and other community resources in her area. Brittany here started with a strong public engagement and collaboration to address the issue of youth recreational access to public lands, which informed the management plan. And I pretty much more or less wrote a volunteer management plan and utilized public engagement to promote volunteerism on public lands. Each of our projects ultimately sought to result in a sense of stewardship on public lands. This can come from many ways, as you can see. And the more people that you inspire to be a steward, the more people there are out there protecting those lands, our lands. So how we're gonna get started here today, Allie has actually sent a pre-recorded 15-minute video. I'll go second. I'll tell you about my work in northern New Mexico with national parks. And Brittany will round out our panel talking about her work with the Greater Arkansas River Nature Association.
Hi everyone. My name is Allie Bell, and I can't be with you today in person because I'm currently serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Paraguay. I arrived in Paraguay in September 2017 with my husband Dylan, who you'll see in many of the photos. And for our first 3 months, we lived with a wonderful host family in our training community near the capital of Asunción. You will see many of these people in the photos you are currently looking at. The first 3 months of our service were filled with training. We took classes to learn both Spanish and Guarani, Paraguay's native indigenous language, as well as learning more about Paraguayan culture and different technical skills that we would use in site. At the conclusion of these 3 months, in December of 2017, we made the journey to our site of Jatutau, where we lived with another host family for 3 months. I have invited my friend Santi to speak a little bit more about Jatutau.
Ok. Un poco sobre la historia de Jatutau. Este pueblito tan pequeño y poco conocido a nivel mundial, pero tiene grandes recursos y gente muy importante, gente muy laboriosa, trabajadora. Y Jatutau es un pueblo pequeño, menos aproximadamente con 12.000 habitantes. La historia en sí nace a anteriormente los colonizadores. Entonces habían dejado un caracol en medio del agua, y entonces de ahí nace el nombre Yatutayu, ¿verdad? Como sabemos, Yatuta es caracol y es agua. Entonces, en ese sentido, se unió esas palabras para hacer el nombre de Yatutayu.
The next few months were spent getting to know our new community and the people that live there. So this meant partaking in the national pastime of drinking tereré. I invited my friend Gustavo Barcelo and the president of the Ecological Committee to talk a little bit more about tereré.
Ok, yo voy a hablar de lo que estamos tomando ahora, compartiendo. Bueno, esto se llama tereré, es una bebida tradicional de Paraguay. Necesitamos agua, el termo, una bombilla y una guampa. También adentro hay una hierba, es Ilex paraguariensis, que es para tomar el tereré.
So these first months were spent drinking tereré and working on language. Being able to communicate is fundamental to working with people, and I had a lot of work to do when I first arrived in Jatutau. Aside from spending time with people in their homes, I also celebrated with Paraguayans on special holidays such as Independence Day and International Day of the Worker. I also had a brief stint in the hospital with dengue fever, which unfortunately lined up with Jess and Sally's visit to Paraguay. One of the most important aspects of the first few months in sight was listening to what the people of Jatutau wanted and what was important to them. I knew this was also a critical step in forming my master's project. Completing a community needs assessment and community mapping are part of the Peace Corps process for integrating into your community. I use these activities as opportunities to have thoughtful conversations with the people of Jatutau. Additionally, I went to the schools in the urban center to introduce myself and to hear from educators and youth in the community. During these conversations, nearly everyone seemed to ask if I had been to Salto Tembeu, the local waterfall park. It was clearly a very important place for the community and a place that they were all very proud of. I invited one of my project sponsors, Daisy Salcedo, the Secretary of Tourism and Youth, to talk a little bit more about the importance of Salto Tembeu.
Es una reserva donde tenemos plantas nativas, animales silvestres y aparte de eso también que se explota turísticamente, pero siempre tratando de cuidar la parte del medio ambiente. Los yatutavenses somos muy celosos por nuestro parque, ya que, como está diciendo, la historia del distrito de Yatutau nace en ese lugar y entonces ahí, ¿verdad?, nace ese celo de querer cuidar lo que es nuestro y tratar de concienciar también día a día a los ciudadanos para cuidar el medio ambiente, porque sin un medio ambiente cuidable no podemos sobrevivir nosotros también.
To understand the importance of Salto Tembeu a little more, I also talked to some of the pioneers that first settled in Jatutau in 1972. They said that when they arrived, the forest was so thick you couldn't see the sky. Jatutau used to be part of the Atlantic forest, which today is one of the most biodiverse but also threatened ecosystems in the world. Today, Jatutau is made up of mostly monocropped soy fields that produce for large international companies. For reference, we have a Cargill-owned port that is only 30 kilometers from the Jatutau center. You can see on the map how little of Jatutau today is forest. Really, the only remaining significant piece is the 22 hectares at Salto. I knew after learning all of this that I wanted to focus my project on Salto Tembeu. However, I also needed to take into account the extreme poverty of Jatutau. The average income is $16 per person per month. Salto Tembeu represents a much-needed, viable source of income for the municipality that they would like to grow in the coming years. However, they don't have very many economic resources to aid in this growth. At this point, I started working with the Ecological Committee of Young People. This committee had been established prior to Dylan and I arriving in Jatutau. However, they had not been very active in the community as of late. The idea of volunteerism has not really taken root in Paraguayan society. There's a long history of people asking the government to solve any community issue, but as you can imagine, this is not always very efficient. To help propagate the idea of volunteerism more within the committee, I took a few steps to help them along. First, I helped plan a leadership workshop, which happened in June 2018. This workshop focused on creating a welcoming environment within the committee and how to plan and organize more efficient meetings. From there, I worked with the committee to plan a large reforestation volunteer project at Salto Tembeu in July of 2018. This project took 3 months of prep to secure donations from the municipality and the Paraguayan Forest Service. On the day, we had 80 volunteers at the project that planted more than 200 native trees. The committee members and the municipality were thrilled with the outcome and eager for more projects. At the beginning of 2019, the municipality came to the committee, requesting their help at the other tourist site in our district, the Hanging Bridge. This is a suspension bridge that leads to a scenic island on the Tembeu River. The municipality had clear-cut a trail that led straight down a steep slope to the riverbank, and they needed a safer way for visitors to access the river. With the committee, we planned 5 workdays in January and February of 2019 to build a staircase out of recycled tires. With the success of these projects and the energy that the Ecological Committee has to keep working in the community, I approached the municipality about further projects at Salto Tembeu. I came to realize that they had no management plan in place, but yet they were receiving more than 6,000 visitors in a single summer. Peace Corps Paraguay staff confirmed that management plans, especially for municipality-owned parks, are not a common practice here in Paraguay. Thus came about my project of writing a management plan for Salto Tembeu that would help the municipality think through some of the environmental risks facing the park, while also leveraging community resources such as the Ecological Committee. And in support of my project, I have a few words from Daisy, the Secretary of Tourism, and Ramon Martinez, the Secretary of the Environment, to share with you all.
Es muy importante, primeramente para mí también como secretaria de Turismo, porque no contamos con un plan de gestión actual. Este trabajo nos va a servir muchísimo para poder trabajar con proyectos más adelantes, ya que son proyectos de corto y largo plazo. Nos va a servir muchísimo ya tanto como en la comunidad y también a nosotros como funcionarios de la municipalidad, porque nos va a ayudar muchísimo en las herramientas que tiene adentro, y también hay ciertas cosas que incluso nosotros no teníamos en cuenta, y así nos va a ayudar muchísimo, es muy importante.
Por eso tenemos que ir más trabajando con el municipio en todo lo que es el cuidado ambiental, la limpieza, todo lo que es la educación para que sea sostenible.
I'm now going to talk about a few of the key aspects that I included of my management plan of Salto Tembeu. As of right now, our municipality is in negotiations with a binational dam project between Paraguay and Argentina to secure funding for a few larger projects they would like to complete, such as a pool, a zip line, and an asphalt road. However, with these projects, there has been no environmental analysis to assess the different impacts that these projects would have. For this reason, I knew it would be really important to include an environmental risk section of my management plan and get a conversation started around how different projects can impact not only the physical environment within the park, but also the economic viability of the park. A few of the environmental risks that I included in my plan are further deforestation of the area, floods and erosion, which the park is already experiencing to a high degree, human contamination in the form of trash. Especially after holidays and summer weekends, this is already a problem. Many people throw beer cans and diapers near water sources within the park. Further loss of biodiversity, climate change, as well as others. I also included a few infrastructure and safety risks, such as facilities that need to be updated, parking, because at this time, there is no designated parking space within the park. People simply drive wherever they like, whether that is over plant life or sport courts. Employees, because at this time there's only one employee within the park, as well as general safety. The park is located 12 kilometers down a dirt road from the main road and the health clinic. There's no cell service or Wi-Fi within the park, and no park-designated vehicle. This definitely presents a problem for emergencies. All of these risks are important for the municipality to consider, and potentially come up with appropriate mitigation strategies depending on the projects they want to move forward with. The second aspect of this management plan that I included is leveraging community resources. The economic reality of our municipality prevents them from pursuing larger projects with higher price tags. I wanted this management plan to include projects that would be feasible for the municipality. Some of these ideas included leveraging the ecological committee for larger projects, as well as for a potential volunteer guide program, which could potentially alleviate the need for more employees. School and university students. As of right now, there are several school groups that like to visit the Salto. The municipality could offer a group rate or discounted entrance if the school groups were willing to help with wildlife surveys or project work days. Using recycled materials is also a part of leveraging community resources. Jatutau has a municipal dump that is full of materials that could be reused in creative ways within the park, like the tires that were used to create the staircase at the hanging bridge. One other way to leverage community resources would be to use local businesses to sponsor larger projects. The Ecological Committee has already done this in the reforestation project we completed in July of 2018. They got local businesses to buy signs that had environmental messages that they put up within the park. Given the high visitor traffic of the park, I think that other businesses would be willing to support larger projects. A few of the suggested projects that I included within the management plan really focus on education and stewardship. The park is called the Ecological Park of Salto Tembeu. However, this title carries little weight. There are not really any ecological aspects to Salto Tembeu. So all of the suggested projects included within my management plan bolster the idea that this is an ecological park. Creating trail improvements with park maps and trail maps, animal or tree identification signs, and different signage that would talk about the importance of conservation of this tiny piece of the Atlantic forest. All of these projects would come at little to no cost to the municipality and would help future generations appreciate Salto Tembeu and realize the importance of its conservation. For the future sustainability of my project, I plan on presenting this plan to both the municipality and the Ecological Committee, and to begin work on some of these projects with my remaining 6 months of service. I will present this plan to my follow-up Peace Corps volunteer, who will arrive in Jatutau in December of 2019, just as I am exiting my service. And I have already presented this plan to the Peace Corps Paraguay staff. In case there are ever other Peace Corps volunteers who want to do this kind of work in their districts as well. I have a few people who I would like to thank, without whom this project would not have been possible. Sally Thode and Dr. Jess Young for their continuous guidance and advice during this MEM and Peace Corps experience. The Peace Corps Paraguay staff for always supporting my work. My husband Dylan for his relentless editing of this project. And of course, to my community of Jatutau, especially Daisy Salcedo and Ramon Martinez in the municipality. Thus concludes my video segment. Thank you so much for allowing me to share more about my project and my life here in Paraguay. I will now take questions via video conference.
That one over there. And Allie, I just unmuted us. There was a great applause. Maybe we should do it again.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ethan, go ahead.
Allie, that was an awesome presentation. Thanks for all the work you're doing. Has there been any social resistance? Anybody in your networks that have disliked this? Wait, which one did I look at?
I just changed it.
Oh, okay. Anybody that's been resistant to this plan? Have you stumbled across people who have maybe vested interest in this plan not developing?
No, I wouldn't say resistance per se. However, the municipality is pretty insistent on going forward with the pool and the zip line plans that they have. You know, there's a couple other parks in the area that have zip lines or have some of these other features that they've seen and seem to be successful. So I think, you know, kind of in their mind, it's like, well, that's successful there, so it'll be successful here, let's do it. And a lot of times that's kind of the culture of Paraguay, is there's not a lot of planning in some aspects. But I've had really productive conversations, especially with our Secretary of Tourism. You know, she read the plan for the first time and she was like, wow, so many of these things I hadn't even thought of. This is really great. So, you know, there's not really a culture of management plans, and there's also not money, you know, in a very poor country for some of these, you know, what it takes to actually put together a management plan. So I think that they're eager to, they know the importance of protecting Salto Tembeyu, and they know the importance to the community. So I think it's just, there are some other barriers that aren't really internal within people, but just kind of are built into Paraguay being a poor country.
Allie, you have a question in your chat box?
All right. So the question is, what was the key way your plan addressed program sustainability in terms of future PCB involvement and or local leadership going forward after you leave? Thanks, Price. That's a great question. Definitely working with the ecological committee has been key. Like I said in the video, there's not really a culture of volunteerism in Paraguay. They do have committees for things, but usually these committees are kind of built to ask for more resources from the municipality. They don't necessarily do like volunteering work themselves. So working with them to actually plan some hands-on work days and show them, you know, even with a small group of people, you know, and kind of the culture in Paraguay as well is, okay, if we're gonna have a work day, we have to have lunch, and we have to, you know, it has to be kind of this formal thing. And so trying to break some of those barriers and show that, you know, we only have 5 people today, but still with this group of 5 people, we can put together a project and we can do some great work. So working with this group of young people and growing this group of young people, because as of right now, a lot of our leadership within the ecological committee, they're in college, and you know, some of them are, you know, in their young to mid-20s. So also getting some younger folks, you know, in high school and even middle school involved to show them what volunteering can be like has been really, I think, the biggest key to sustainability of this project.
When you, I'm sorry, go for it. When you start asking people to volunteer, what kinds of techniques do you use? Like, are they able to use it on like their resumes, or are you able to incentivize them that way, or do you have to take different avenues to ask them to volunteer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple things with the ecological committee. I feel like first, kind of like in the United States, I feel like people get FOMO, they get fear of missing out, and like we make the projects fun. And WhatsApp is kind of like the Instagram of Paraguay. Everyone's got on their WhatsApp status, they put photos and everything. So we encourage on our volunteer days for people to put up those photos and show, you know, what a great time we had building a staircase or planting trees. And people, you know, they want to be involved. You know, they see other young folks having a good time and being involved in their community. They're like, oh yeah, I want to do that too. So that has been a really big part of the strategy, as well as just doing a lot of work within the schools and doing projects there, and talking to kids. There's not, especially in our rural district that is very poor, there are no organized activities. I mean, we have one dance school and one music school, and there's one soccer team, but there's no after school sports, there's no after school clubs. And there's not money for that kind of stuff. So I think when people see an organized group having fun, like in an extracurricular kind of way, they're really intrigued and they want to get involved.
All right, that's 5 minutes for Allie. Let's give her another big.
Thank you.
And we'll bring her back in for our group Q&A. We'll turn it back over.
So hi again, I'm Star. My project was all about volunteerism on public lands and building a sense of stewardship. When I was thinking about this project and how much I really care about volunteerism in public lands, I thought, you know what, I have been involved in volunteering in some way, shape, or form since middle school. In middle school, my parents they both work for hospitals. So every summer, middle school up until high school, I was volunteering at my mom's hospital. On to college, a little fun fact about me that I don't like to tell many people, but I was actually a sorority girl. Yeah. And my sorority was Gamma Sigma Sigma. It's a national volunteer service sorority. After graduation, I took my first position, and that position was AmeriCorps Vista. For those of you who don't know what that is, VISTA is an acronym that stands for Volunteer in Service to America. That position was actually at Tent Rocks National Monument in northern New Mexico. That's where I fell in love with the lands of enchantment and also with public lands management. So I was super excited that my project, I would be having a more leadership role in volunteerism. In February of 2018 through this February 2019, I was the Community Volunteer Ambassador. I worked for several parks in northern New Mexico, Valles Caldera National Preserve, Bandelier National Monument being the main two, and a third one I'll talk to you a little bit later. So the objectives for my project were to build a VIP program for Valles Caldera National Preserve. This is actually the nation's newest preserve. It went under Park Service Management in 2015, and they did have volunteers. However, they had no guidance documents on how to manage the program and manage it well. And also, as a part of this, building the program, I was tasked with developing new volunteer opportunities, and that was site stewardship. I did that for Valles Caldera as well as Bandelier National Monument. So why is this important? Last year, over 300,000 volunteers volunteered over 7 million hours nationwide with the National Park Service. That's the equivalent of about 3,500 full-time employees. So we couldn't do this without them. Also, studies have shown that volunteers develop a place attachment for the sites that they volunteer at. Specifically, volunteers for parks can facilitate pro-environmental behavior, everything from recycling all the way to participating in civic engagement like voting. So what did I do? Building the program, typical federal government stuff, writing documents, the volunteer handbook. It's like an orientation for volunteers and they come on board. I assisted with the VIP supervisor handbook. There's various park staff who manage volunteers, so this is like a guidebook for them on how to do that. Recruitment strategies, programming strategies and outline. There are several different days throughout the year and events throughout the year that is around volunteerism. So what those days were and when to start promoting them. Position descriptions for volunteers, outreach material. So I actually created this. It's called a RAC card, and it outlines all of the volunteer opportunities at Valles Caldera, and I'll pass it around. And developing new volunteer opportunities, like site stewardship. So yes, I did develop an outline for Valles Caldera, but at Bandelier, when I first got to Bandelier, my supervisor, she's a park ranger there, said, you know, I think we really need a site stewardship program at Sankoli Village. This is a photo of it here. It's actually a satellite site to Bandelier National Monument. It's about a 25-minute drive from the visitor center, and due to like short staff with the Park Service there, there's not a lot of presence there. And because there's not a lot of presence, there's a lot of degradation. There's a lot of social trails there, and also messing with the cultural resources. People like to pick up the pot sherds and stack them, which thankfully they're not taking them, but we would like for them to leave that alone. And there's also been looting there as well. So the idea is to have more of a presence there to decrease this degradation. I also knew about this St. Louis unit and that it really needed a stewardship program, because actually when I was in Corey Knapp's NEPA class, I analyzed a NEPA document that was the St. Louis unit management plan that was written in 2015 that identified the need for a stewardship program there. So here are some of the goals of my program: promoting the preservation of the natural and cultural resources, educating the public about responsible recreation, informing visitors about the park, and organizing the local community to make a difference in our national parks. So some of the challenges, although this site stewardship program was identified in the management plan, and although a ranger specifically said we really need this program, when I took it to the management team at Bandelier National Monument, I actually got some pushback. Some of the division chiefs were concerned, they knew I was there for 1 year, about the workload after I left, who was going to take this project over. So I worked with them in several meetings after that initial meeting to develop like a transition plan for when I left. Also stakeholder engagement. So San Ildefonso Pueblo has direct ancestral ties to St. Louis Village. Therefore, I really wanted to engage them in my project. However, it was very difficult. They're a sovereign nation, and there's kind of a rule, like an unsaid type of rule, where it's sovereign. So I couldn't just walk in and talk to the governor or the council. One day, I did get a little bit bold, and I called a Mr. Tim Martinez. He's the director of natural resources at Sanai. And he answered the phone. He said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let me give you a call right back." He didn't call me back. He then proceeded to call Jamie Civitea back. She is the park archaeologist. So she knows Sanai. She's known in the Pueblo. They trust her and know her. And so she actually ended up being my spokesperson for the project. And at Valles Caldera, so I actually had a bit of an opposite thing happen there, where I had no pushback at all. They were so excited about my site stewardship program that they began to recruit volunteers immediately. And I had a lot of people interested, and I had to send a bunch of emails saying, "Sorry, can you please wait, pending, hopefully summer 2019, we'll get this program started, but thank you for your interest, and I'll keep your name." Also, the shutdown. Obviously, I'm sure it impacted a lot of our projects. I couldn't work for a month. All of my government documents were on my government laptop, meaning my entire master's project I had no access to for an entire month. I think I called Melanie crying a few times. And also I had 2 events planned, the Martin Luther King Day service that got canceled, and I had a VIP supervisor training planned as well that I also did not get to complete. But with challenges comes success. And my St. Louis site stewardship program was a real success. I worked with different staff to figure out the logistics of the program. How many people are we going to have? How are we going to get a radio there so those people don't have to drive 20 minutes to the visitor center and back up to St. Louis? Recruitment, I recruited 6 volunteers personally, and then training. So 3 weeks ago, actually right here you can see, this is Jamie and our volunteers. We went out to St. Louis, and she showed them around, showed them the village, what they were looking at, what they were looking for. I also had the trails coordinator come out. He taught them how to properly cover social trails. And I also brought out law enforcement who talked to them about speaking to the public and confrontations and different things like that, as well as radio training. At Valles Caldera, the completion of the documents, and I also hosted several different volunteer events throughout the year. And probably total between all the parts was about 50 new volunteers, which is amazing. So what would a management plan even be if there were no volunteers? So some of the other things I did was a lot of community outreach. I did a lot of tabling at events in the community to promote this volunteerism. I also worked with Manhattan Project, National Historical Park. Bandelier is located really close to Los Alamos, New Mexico, which was the secret city and where they developed the first ever atomic bomb in the 40s. And now there's a historical park commemorating the lives of those people who lived in that city in the 40s. There's no land here. It's just a small visitor center, which is why there's no site stewardship program. But these volunteers are some of the most passionate volunteers I've ever met. So what's next? Sigma Unit Management Plan has actually been updated in 2018. They gave me a shout out as the Community Volunteer Ambassador, which is really cool, saying I'm instigating the site stewardship program, that it will continue on. And there's also a cultural landscape report. So a cultural landscape report is just a guide on the treatment of cultural landscapes. And that just talks about how Bandelier and San Ildefonso Pueblo are collaborating in the future on what exactly to interpret at St. Louis and how to interpret it. At Valles Caldera, I left them with all the guiding documents, so it's essentially a toolkit on how to manage volunteers in the future. So in conclusion, volunteers are so important to the National Park Service. We could not do it without them. And once you inspire that stewardship in them, that can be spread to others. That's so important for protecting our public lands. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of my friends and family. Thank you, Dr. Melanie Armstrong, Kimberly Duvall, the Chief of Interpretation at Valles Caldera, my community sponsor. She also fostered my pet hedgehog for a while. The Margie and John Haley Environmental Project Fund, Bandelier staff, all of them, all of my volunteers at all three parks. I couldn't have done my project without them. And the MEM faculty cohort. Thank you. Also, I have really cool patches to pass out.
This is Massey.
Any questions? Scott.
Star, great presentation. And I feel bad for the folks that aren't here and don't get to see some of the things. So maybe we'll hold it up to the camera afterwards. But my question is about looting. So that's the first time we've heard about looting during the MEM projects, I think this week. Are there management, what are the management tools that folks use? Obviously boots on the ground makes sense. Are there other things that can prevent looting of a site like this?
Yeah, so actually looting was happening, so there's St. Louis, it's like on the top of a mesa, and the looting was happening down at another little site called Duchess Castle, and that actually doesn't have a social trail to it. So in the management plan, there's plans to actually build a trail there. So that way, more people have access to it, then maybe it's not like some secret thing that they can't go to and see. So I think that's a part of the reason why there was looting there. But yeah, things like that.
That's really interesting, like actually directing people to the site more reduces looting. Oh.
Yeah, because then you don't have that, you can't go here. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Star, that was awesome. I wanted to hear a little bit more about what the continuation plan is and who is taking over. Is it sort of different entities at different parks that are taking over the volunteer program, or how will that work?
It's pretty much all internally. The St. Louis site stewards, there's a lead volunteer who helped me out a lot, so she'll be taking over some of it. And the different division chiefs, it's going to be kind of split between them. And then at Valles Caldera, it's also split. So my supervisor is the chief of interpretation, but as a collateral duty, she's the VIP coordinator. So I guess another kind of collateral thing will be taking over the VIP program until we can identify another person, a staff member, to be the VIP supervisor.
A question from the distance, from a couple of people, is how can other parks implement these kind of programs?
A lot of parks have these, and what I really did was really research other ways people have done this and follow that. I can get them the recruitment strategies. It's a lot of, yeah, just talking to different people and being out in your community. So I hope that answered their question.
I think it is. I'll ask a question. I think we've talked a lot about assumptions that you make around volunteerism and the things that we assume people walk away from volunteerism. What might you do to better understand volunteer motivations? How could you investigate that through future research?
Yeah, so actually I committed this week. Originally there was a third component to my project that I didn't have time for, and it's a survey. I would like to survey volunteers for the parks and also just community members who don't volunteer for the parks to see what their motivations are. And Michelle, thank you. Earlier this week, you really talked in depth about a cue chart of how to do that. So I think I might use that model as well, but to really understand why they're volunteering and then taking that info.
I've got a question about during the government shutdown and everything, when your MEM project came grinding to a halt. Not that all of us might be influenced by that, but computers crash and like stuff happens where it's losing data or whatever. For that process, did you have other aspects that you could work on? Like definitely the tears and everything. I feel that. I haven't started mine yet, but how do you handle something like that? Like, are you twiddling your thumbs? What do you?
So what Melanie suggested actually, and I did call her crying, was to work on a transition plan, or work on, like, be prepared for when the issue is solved. So she was like, just be ready, you know, everyone's gonna be busy when the shutdown ends and the government reopens, so just be prepared, you know, get on it immediately when you get back and get any meetings done as soon as possible. So just being prepared. So I think that's my time. If there are any other questions, I'll get to later. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Brittany Massey. Thanks for being here today. This is my project that I did with the Greater Arkansas River Nature Association in Salida. And I focused on youth recreation access in communities near Browns Canyon National Monument. Oh.
Already?
So I want to talk a little bit about my background and why I decided to choose this project. I have a background in social work, in agricultural production and farming, and also working with youth and community developments, especially around recreation opportunities for youth. During the time that I spent as a social worker, I really missed my experiences in the outdoors and encouraging that kind of lifestyle for families and youth. And I decided to come into the MEM program so that I could focus on promoting that in my future work. The Greater Arkansas River Nature Association, I'll refer to that as GARNA a lot throughout the presentation, presented a really neat opportunity during my ENVS 611 class when we were focusing on wicked problems. And they presented this problem to us that a lot of the children in Chaffee County, despite being in a recreation hotspot where tourists are coming in and having all kinds of opportunities to be outdoors, and despite the fact that they're surrounded by these beautiful public lands, a lot of these kids don't have the same opportunity to participate in these activities. They have barriers in finances, in transportation, in time, groups to go out and do stuff with. And so while we were in our class, well, actually, I'll get to that in just a second. So I want everybody to take a minute, and I want you to think about, you can close your eyes if it helps, or you can leave them open. I want you to think about an experience that you had during childhood, outdoors, Maybe you were with some people that were really important to you. Maybe you were in a really special environment, and try to remember what you were feeling, what you felt like after you got off that trip, what you learned. Does anybody want to share about one of their experiences?
I was walking around the woods by myself at 5 years old,
Uh-huh.
and we lived on 52 acres of land in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And I was kind of out there on my own, and all of a sudden a tractor came up, and it was my uncle. And he said, "What are you doing out here?" And he picked me up, and I remember going home and saying, "Why did you take me home? I was happy out there."
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think even though we may not realize it at the time, and especially when we're children, these experiences have a profound impact on how we view the natural world as an adult. And so that's why I'm going to talk a little bit about why recreation and being able to get outdoors is so important. Research shows that experiences outdoors helps to create a connection between the individual and the natural world. And without that connection, we don't care as much about the natural environment. So it's really critical to get out there and spend time outdoors. And sources also show that the more time you're in a natural environment with mentors and adults that care about you, the more it increases your connection as well. Having that connection with nature is shown to increase conservation behaviors or pro-environmental behaviors. That is anything from composting, recycling, turning your lights off, shutting off the water, all the way to when you brush your teeth, all the way to being an active and engaged adult in your community around environmental issues. The more background we have in the natural world, the more likely we are to be that kind of individual. Time outdoors increases our health emotionally, mentally, and physically. And for youth, recreation opportunities and other alternative activities creates protective factors against risky behaviors that they might otherwise be engaged in. So providing these opportunities for youth to get outdoors and not just be tied down in their homes or be hanging out in groups, loitering or whatever. Let's get these kids out in programs. So I want to talk a little bit about the background again and the project development. So I worked with Amelia Remington and Star, who's in my panel here, in the 611 class. And we looked at this issue that Garnet had presented through a bunch of different lenses, and we tried to create solutions or possible solutions to engage the community in addressing this issue. We created a frame-based analysis, a grant database that focused on community, like engaging the community, and then also actual funds for creating outdoor play spaces. And we wrote a letter of inquiry to one of those grants. And our conclusion from all of our work in this project in the class was that a safe outdoor play space for youth was a priority. Some of the communities that this information was coming from are communities that lie outside the main centers of Buena Vista and Salida. And so we wanted to make sure that these outlying communities, unincorporated communities, also had opportunities for safe play spaces. And a lot of those areas are surrounded by private lands, so it makes it difficult to put a playground or build trails. We decided, and our sponsor also helped us decide that the best case scenario of a project outcome would be a community-driven, supported, and implemented decision that would address limited access youth in the area have to safe outdoor play spaces. And this is where I picked up my master's project. So I worked in Chaffee County in this particular area. This is Browns Canyon National Monument right there. And Salida is down here, and Buena Vista is up here. And you can see those are big rural communities. And then Nathrop is right around here, and Johnson's Village is up here. And those are little tiny unincorporated communities that don't have the same access to recreation or trails that some of the youth in Buena Vista and Salida might have. Another thing with this is that a lot of the grants that target organizations or programs or are funding them to get the youth outdoors, they try to get the most bang for their buck. And so we have a lot of youth in Buena Vista, and we have a lot of youth in Salida, and we might have 10 or 15 youth in Nathrop or Johnson's Village. So So something that I wanted to do in this project was I really wanted to work to empower the community. I wanted to give a voice to people that were most affected by the issue, as well as individuals that could help build solutions and help implement solutions. I wanted to facilitate a collaborative space, and I hoped to develop structures like an action committee that might help address this issue and let the community build solutions in the way they think was most important. So what did I do? To start with, I did a lot of research. I learned about different kinds of solutions that would address creating more access for youth, from looking at conservation easements and funding for those to all the way to looking at how to bring people together from the community to create a steering committee, and then looking at other solutions as well. I wanted to get a good amount of background information that I might be able to share with stakeholders. And I learned a lot about youth and being connected to the natural world and how important that was. As I learned about all this, I started to reach out to stakeholders. I identified people that had interest or influence in the project and might be interested in the issue of recreation access for youth. And I also wanted to learn more from them about what some of their aligning interests might be and if we could collaborate on bringing this to fruition. I worked hard to develop relationships with stakeholders. I attended a number of different meetings and presentations that were related to the project. I went to a Healthy Kids Colorado presentation with the Family and Youth Initiative, and this is where I learned a lot about creating protective factors for kids in the community. I also worked with the Browns Canyon Citizens Coalition to do work in Browns, help inform the National Monument Management Plan for Browns Canyon. And I had a meeting with the kind of exclusive homeowners association, Chateau Chaparral. Initially, when we started this project, we identified that we might be able to create access through this community, because this picture that you see in the background is actually a footbridge that they have across the Arkansas River. And it's easy for youth in Nathrop to access that, but despite our conversation and hope that they might be willing to open that up, they're not willing to do that at this point because of liability and privacy issues. So we continued brainstorming and looking for other opportunities to increase access. I also did a presentation with the Stage and Rail Trail and tried to bring in a bunch of stakeholders and individuals from that group. I did a lot of work with the Browns Canyon Citizens Coalition. So at the same time that I was working to increase youth access, the Browns Canyon National Monument Alternative Resource Management Plan was being developed. And this is something that I was able to sit down with stakeholders from a bunch of different environmental organizations and talk about how important access was in the monument, how we could increase trailhead development or proper trails, and also signage and education opportunities. And then also, because it's a national monument, we can get funding for county roads leading into the monument, which would help to address transportation barriers that some of the youth were facing. So it's not a direct solution, but it's one that works towards that. So that was really neat. And I also facilitated several public meetings in the community, specifically dealing with the issue of youth recreation access, where we talked about some barriers and solutions to access, but we also discussed opportunities that might be available in Browns Canyon. So I had two meetings. I wanted to originally host a meeting in between the communities of Buena Vista and Salida so that I could try and target Nathrop and Johnson's Village and bring in folks from those areas, but the locations that were available didn't work for our hours we needed, or it made transportation even more of a barrier. So I decided to host two meetings, one in Salida and one in Buena Vista, to try and cover those stakeholders. The second meeting, and I'm going to start with the second meeting just because it didn't go as expected. We had a couple participants and we were able to review some information from the first meeting and look over a presentation, but we weren't able to address forming a steering committee or an action committee because there weren't enough participants at that meeting. So that's something that I think we're going to continue to look at for the continuation of the project, is how to best move this forward. The first meeting, however, we had a lot of participants, a lot of youth that came to this, about 7 or 8 youth from the Extraordinary Teen Council in Salida. They were very interested in transportation developments, and they wanted to collaborate around this issue and see how we might be able to work together. And then there were about 4 community members present as well. And that was a great meeting where people really came together. We were able to watch a short video from Garna, talk about the issue, learn more about some of the barriers, and then looking at any other barriers that I may have missed, and looking at solutions. And the groups came up with just an incredible amount of solutions, everything from collaborating for transportation developments and grant funding to looking at how to incorporate recreation access right into the school programs because the kids spend so much time in school already. And just a lot of really good stuff that came out of that. So some of the challenges and opportunities with my project, it was a little bit of a challenge, or I wasn't quite sure how to address the fact that we had so many youth that were interested and not as many stakeholders that were present in the meetings. And I had hoped that there would be some more stakeholders for the youth to collaborate with, but it also showed me that these kids really cared about this issue. They were very energetic and they really wanted to partner up and do something about it. And so that helped highlight that. And I think that's going to be a really important next step for this project, is for Garna to collaborate with these kids and their sponsors. And then another thing that might have caused a little bit of difficulty with some of the meetings was originally we felt like streamlining the planning process for Browns Canyon and this youth recreation access issue. We thought it would help, it would be cohesive and help to build support for it. But I think that people might have a lot of stuff going on and there might be other issues that their attention is centered on at the moment. So at the same time though, having that opportunity to connect with these other stakeholders and advocate in this one major area and this monument for recreation access really proved to be a great opportunity where I could actually advocate for that and see that there's going to be a future development around that access. So some of the recommendations I have for the project is I think it's going to be important, again, for the agency to partner with other local agencies and organizations and to look at working with different youth developments in the community. And again, the public lands initiatives and the opportunity that lays there to work with creating stewardship and creating access in these public lands. I think any opportunities in the community to do that would be really great. So I wanted to thank my advisor, Dr. Clark, Suzanne Ewy, Dominique Nacarado, she's my sponsor from Garna, all of my MEM colleagues and professors, friends and family, the individuals listed, and all of these organizations that I collaborated with in some capacity throughout my project. Thank you.
First of all, I'm just so excited to see what you've done, being involved in the 611 project to now. That's so awesome. I think you kind of talked about this already, but I want to hear more about like maybe what was the most exciting part of your project and like what you and Dominique got like really fired up about over the course of the project.
Gosh, I'm not sure I can speak for Dominique what her most important thing is. I think she probably really appreciated seeing the participation from the community. And I guess for me, that was also the most exciting part, was when we had that meeting where a good number of people came and they were able to collaborate together. It was great. Like I did a lot of research before before my project, so I felt like I had a lot of ideas, but this was supposed to be something that was community driven. So to get that feedback from them was incredible. Yeah. Thank you.
Dominique's on, she had a comment for you, and so she can also, so Dominique, please go ahead and turn on your mic and feel free to mention the nice comment you wrote about Brittany as well as answer that.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Brittany. I can't emphasize enough the importance of this project for just keeping the conversation going. It's not an easy thing. like you said, but we have to keep it in front of people. And I have a lot of faith that something synergistic is gonna come of it. Like a lot of projects, it just takes patience, and it might not happen during your project time. But thank you so much for doing the project and keeping it going. And I'm excited now about what Ali said about an ecological society of young people and the youth participation that we had for this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a little bit about what worked well for you in terms of getting participants to come out. So it sounds like the Salida meeting was really packed with people. What did you do for that meeting? And then what do you think happened with that Buena Vista meeting? Why wasn't as well attended?
So my theory on this is I was over prepared for the Buena Vista meeting.
Oh.
And I advertised early, very early, and I didn't send out additional reminders to everybody. Whereas with the first meeting, we advertised about 2 weeks to a week and a half before the meeting. And I think it was right on people's minds. So that's something that I realized for the future is that I really need to be focused on people's participation and making sure they're coming. Yeah. Rich?
Yes, a very good presentation. I'm wondering, because Salida apparently is going to have, or is working on about the biggest tiny home community in the country. I'm wondering if the things that you went through, are they also being applied to that project? It sounds like it should be sort of a target for what you've been doing.
Right, as far as the development of that community. Yeah, I think it would be great. And there's a lot of research that shows that the more opportunities, the more access points that kids and adults have for recreation, the more likely they are to be physically active and be outdoors. So, you know, when people are developing communities, I think that engineering, that design is really important to consider. Where do you put a bike path? Where is there a playground? Yeah, definitely. Did that?
Yeah. Well, apparently it's, if I understood what I read correctly, it's also right along the Arkansas River, or connected to it.
Oh, okay.
And that offers a lot of opportunity, but some
Right.
challenges too, in terms of high water.
Right, absolutely. Any other questions? Time for one more?
Okay. I'm not sure if I missed this or if you spoke to like different like youth outdoor organizations that you got to speak with or partner with, like youth climbing or mountain biking orgs, or like trying to create more access for all of these populations around the area.
Yeah, so I did meet with individuals from a couple different youth groups, and one specifically that focused on young women and getting them outdoors. Again, some of these organizations fell within that grant funding area where they didn't necessarily want to take on work in other communities. I'm not sure all of their reasons for not directly engaging, but lots of opportunities around that. Right, time's up.
Thank you.
We'll bring Allie back up on the screen and have some time for questions for the panel.
I have a question about your stakeholders and inclusivity, and it's got two parts. So were there any populations that you guys worked with that you weren't able to reach? And did you bring anybody to the tables that you were working at that you disagreed with? And how did you handle that, that disagreement?
I can start. So I guess for me, as far as, I'll start with the disagreement, and there wasn't too many stakeholders. I didn't have disagreements with any of the stakeholders. It was more that we shared our work, and if we found aligning interests, we connected again. And if we didn't, we kind of drifted apart, and that was okay.
Yeah.
But as far as the the one with the disagreement, working with the homeowners association was a little difficult because there was just this great opportunity, and a lot of people, I think, felt like this could be a good opportunity, and we have an organization saying, despite whatever solutions we're bringing up with, sorry, that's not a possibility. And as far as how you deal with it, I guess we just moved on to other solutions. You can't push people. You have to be understanding of the reasons that they have things the way they are. And so.
Did you feel like you didn't get any?
Something that I can add to this.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Also on the so my municipality, like I mentioned in the video, they're really pushing for a zip line and a pool at our Salto Park. And I truly think that the zip line is a terrible idea. I don't agree with them in the sense. One of the, to be frank, one of their design proposals is building probably doesn't own the other bank of the river. That belongs to the neighboring district. So they've talked about building a tower in the middle of the river for this zip line, and I think that part of that was my impetus for wanting to write a management plan, just to kind of start the conversation of okay, if we did that, what would be both the environmental impacts, but also, people come to the Salto. I'm sorry, I keep saying Salto, just means waterfall. But they come to see the waterfall and take photos and, enjoy this natural beauty. I think, but also on that same token, I need to remember that Jatutau, I love it. It is my community now, but it is not my forever home. I come from a place of great privilege, and Jatutau is devastatingly poor and viably economic opportunities. So trying to balance, starting a healthy conversation, but also trying to keep my own privilege in check is important.
So I've got a question. So all of you worked with connecting people to the outdoors, basically, volunteers, families, whatever. There's kind of a surface connection. People are gung-ho at first and really into the idea of such things. But do you feel like what you did gave them a deeper, lifelong, or more extensive connection with the out of doors and the stewardship? And if so, why? If not, why? Okay, do you understand the question? Okay.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Well, I think there are those people who do really care, and they're always going to care forever. And I believe, with my writing all these documents and how to recruit, and also it's how to keep volunteers engaged as well, how to keep them coming and volunteering. And I think once you get that key point, that they will continue to come and they will have that deeper connection to it. I guess to be continued, since I would like to survey over the summer to see that connection. So I guess ask me again later.
I think for me, I feel like it did help create more opportunities, and my project indirectly facilitated the opportunity for individuals to have more of a connection. My project is more of a process, and the result of it is something that's going to be carried out over a long time, and especially in this management plan and how they address access. But I think that will leave a long-standing precedence for what community members have the ability to go do in the monument.
Another question from the distance from Kathleen Anthony. Welcome back, Kathleen. It's always good to hear from you. I have a question. How has your work and your projects influenced what you think you want to do as a future career? What have you learned about yourselves in addition to what you've learned about communities, volunteerism, and land management?
I'll answer this one first, if that's okay. So I've been having like kind of an existential crisis since January, since the shutdown. It really made me step back and think about what I want to do. And not only just my project, but the classes I've taken in MEM have really kind of changed my thought process. So I was super gung-ho about working for Park Service. But now with my project pretty much done and like learning new things, I think I want to utilize some of this volunteer coordination skills to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion on public lands going forward.
Yeah, I can speak to this as well. I mean, Peace Corps has been a very transformative experience. But I think especially in terms of writing this management plan and working with my community to really, look at the strengths of the community and kind of assist them in utilizing their own resources. I really like the intersection of both getting to know a community at a deeper level and then finding out how that community can be their own resource. So I hope in my future work that I can work with volunteers and with community members to help them find their own strengths. And also I feel like a big lesson I've learned in this as well is how much time that actually takes. To build up trust in a community isn't something that happens overnight. It doesn't happen within a few weeks. I've been in Paraguay almost 2 years and still am definitely still an outsider in my community. I know I have strong friendships and I have a lot of great connections, but still, I'm still getting to know people. I'm still getting to know more about my community every day. So building that trust and really, being part of a community fabric takes a long time, but it is also critically important to do that step if you want to help people, connect to those important places. Yeah.
For me, I guess what I really learned about public lands and volunteerism and management, I am actually a sustainable and resilient communities track, and Allie and Star are integrated land management. And when I started with the sustainable and resilient communities, I wasn't sure that I would be able to have a position that enabled me to work directly with public lands and the communities around issues with public lands. And I think through this project, I found that the opposite is actually true. And there's still a lot of opportunity to engage the community in those kinds of opportunities, and also to put myself in those situations. So that's something I'm looking forward to in the future, is I think also spending more time in the field and trying to develop my outdoor experiences through my work. Yeah, learned a lot of stuff about myself during the project. Probably shouldn't say all of it, but I also, yeah, it was good.
We have a final question from Dr. Gordon.
Thank you. So I am a huge advocate of volunteerism, but what would you say to someone that said volunteerism allows for us to break the social contract of government to get things done? So we do the work that we have this contract for that they're supposed to do, right? Some of this work. What would you say to someone that had that opinion after your projects and knowing all that you know now?
Good question.
So volunteers are letting government off the hook from paying professionals to do it.
It's not my opinion, but I have heard that argument.
I've worked for many people who have that opinion.
I would say
That question. Sorry, you got it. You go for it, girl.
I would say, as a volunteer myself, that I do it for a reason. I'm there for a reason. Volunteers are there because there's some motivating factor, no matter what. And yeah, I mean, it is true. Government agencies could not do the work without them. But as far as volunteers replacing workers, I don't believe that's true. I don't know how to really argue that point, but I think volunteers are there because they want to be there. No one's forcing them to be there. So, yeah.
I'm gonna bill you out in a second, but Allie wants to speak.
Yeah, so I think this, after my experience in Paraguay, especially Paraguay has a pretty defunct government, really up until 1980, and their government is corrupt in the world. So I think it's a little bit of an easier sell here to be like, your government, no, Paraguayans recognize that they have a pretty not functioning system. So I think it's a little bit easier sell in that terms, saying, you know, government's gonna take a while, they've got a lot of other things they're doing, and there's a lot of corrupt politicians out there. So let's take, you know, matters into our own hands. But also, I don't want this to sound cliched, but we are all stewards of this earth. We all have to live here. You know, this is our home. So that responsibility doesn't just fall to a few, that falls to all of us. And yeah, we all need to do our part.
For you, Brittany, do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think that was great.
Come here for a sec, Star.
Without volunteers, you don't end up with citizens who vote for more government funding.
Point. That's a really interesting point. I feel like she just earned a master's degree, don't you? So please join me in congratulating 3 new masters.